Hello everyone. I hope everyone is fine and healthy. Welcome to this online event about Holochain. Thank you all for being here. This is an event which is co-organized by ISTAR and by the ISCTE ACM student chapter. And we would like to thank Razvan Orga, which is our speaker, for being here with us today and share some information about the Holochain platform and how it can be a more efficient alternative to traditional blockchain. I would like to ask you all to mute all your microphones and leave all your questions till the end of the presentation. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this session. So leave all your questions till the end. Razvan, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and sharing all of this with us. Please, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm super happy to see so many people in attendance. With so many people, I wish we weren't all locked up in our houses and we could have this session in person in Lisbon. But I'm still very pleased that you took an afternoon to spend the time with us and allow me to introduce you a few things about Holochain. I'll start the screen sharing right now so that we jump to the presentation. But before actually starting speaking about Holochain, I would just like to thank Carlos for giving me the opportunity. I moved to Lisbon last August to work on my startup and to set up a community for Holochain in Lisbon. And I reached out to him around that time, suggesting that I'd like to hold a conference or rather an event for university students or university friends and introduce the technology to him. And he was glad, he kindly reached out to me and invited me to do so. So a few words about me. I'm not a technical person. My background is in business and management, and I have discovered Holochain as a tool which responded to my business requirements. So I'm not sure how many of you are actually on the technical side of things. Do you think it would be possible to switch on your cameras and give me a show of hands who's technical of the group, just to get a feel for you and also to see each other? It would be really nice.
Razvan, I would say that 60 to 70% of the people are technical. So.
Okay, great. So, dear technical people, please bear with me if I'm saying something which doesn't really make 100% sense. That's how I got it. That's how I can explain it. But I have two friends who have kindly joined me from Holochain who are very technical and will be able to answer all your technical questions at the end. So stay tuned. You will have everything sorted out. So let me just jump straight into it. Holochain is a beyond blockchain architecture for distributed applications with data integrity. And we are, okay. So we all know that the major paradigm of computing is the centralized client-server application, in which the data is stored centrally. It is easily accessible. It's very easy for the system to expand and be maintained, but it does have some issues with regards to being very prone to being hacked. And the response to this thing came about with the blockchain technology, which tries to reduce the risk of losing that data through the existence of a single point of failure by distributing copies of the database to every single member of the network. Every single member of the network had a copy of the database, which gave the system tremendous resilience in data integrity and availability. But at the same time, it brought about an increase in the cost of transactions a slowdown of the transactions due to reduced throughput. And it also brought about incentives for certain people to invest more in the technology and to build, for example, mining rigs. And as such, what was initially a completely decentralized idea turned out to suffer from the Pareto effect and actually become centralized at different points. And then we have Holochain, which is a completely different paradigm. It builds on peer-to-peer architecture and data sharding, and provides a tremendous data resilience, availability, and integrity at a minimal cost. And it's not a panacea, it's not a silver pill which is used for everything, but we argue that for most of the applications, a blockchain is an overkill and is not needed, whereas Holochain does the job just fine with much less resources and a fraction of the cost. So the three paradigms we had before, put in simpler terms, are defined by this very popular image. You have a centralized single point of failure. We have blockchain, which wanted to be completely decentralized, but it still managed to form a few pockets of centralization, which would be the stronger nodes, and the other nodes are the light nodes. And then we have a fully distributed system on the Holochain side. The issue with blockchain, well, blockchain is amazing, but as I said, for most of the applications, it is an overkill. It has limited throughput because everyone needs to hold a copy of the database. They need to agree on the exact same state of the data on the ledger, which requires tremendous computing power. And as a result, it has brought about a demand for computing power, an increase in the cost of the cryptocurrencies, of the instrument which makes the blockchain technology work, which has brought about an increase in volatility. So you can see here the example of Ethereum, which in the space of 1 year increased from next to nothing to $1,400. So you can imagine there's a great deal of projects which are built on Ethereum, and they all had to purchase the Ether to have their applications running. And in the space of 1 year, the price increased 1,000 times, which of course meant that they could not have any predictability. And sometimes these price increases are for all the wrong reasons, right? So December 2017, we have the CryptoKitties praise, which slowed down the Ethereum network tremendously. So you can't really argue that all the applications that happen there really bring about a lot of value added. Now, as I said, because there is a lot of money involved in the blockchain and the crypto space, obviously there is a Pareto effect which brings more people who have capital and want to invest into the game, and they build they buy and build more capacity for playing the game and contributing to the mining output of the system. And even though in theory Bitcoin, for example, is a completely decentralized, outside anyone's control network, in practice, this is not the case. So we had a moment in 2014 when Ghash.io, which is a mining pooling company in China, accumulated more than 55% of the computing power on the network, which basically meant that they could sway the Bitcoin ledger whichever way they wanted. And of course, blockchain has an issue. It is outrageously wasteful. We can see here that the Bitcoin energy consumption is the equivalent of that of the Czech Republic, or well, 90% of that of Czech Republic. And to put it into the Portuguese perspective, Bitcoin uses 30% more energy per year than Portugal, which is huge by all means. So definitely Bitcoin is very useful for certain applications where you require anonymity, where you require specific data integrity and availability. But for most applications, it is wasteful. You don't actually need to have a global consensus. Not everyone needs to hold everyone else's tweet messages in their databases. And that's a problem because that uses a lot of memory. So in order to respond to that waste, Holochain comes into the scene. But before I get into explaining what Holochain is, I just want to clear the field on a few terms. So we're talking about data integrity, which means that all the application data is created and validated using a shared set of rules, and they are cryptographically enforced, which means that they cannot be tampered with, no matter where they're stored. So you need to make sure that the data you see is the original data and has not been tampered with. The other concept is framework. So a framework is a database for storing, organizing, and finding data. In the concept of Holochain, it's a means for building applications on top of Holochain. And we're talking about applications, distributed applications, dApps or apps as we call them in Holochain. These are similar to web applications, which are now controlled by solutions like Wikipedia, Facebook, Airbnb, but they are distributed and they are presented in a form in which people can easily share hosting power for these applications. So what is Holochain? Holochain is an open source framework for building fully distributed peer-to-peer applications with data integrity. So Holochain is not a blockchain. It's a framework which allows you to build these distributed applications of different flavors based on your requirements. But it intrinsically offers data integrity. So it has a runtime machine which allows you to make sure that data that you are displaying has not been tampered with. Holochain, in theory, being a peer-to-peer distributed application framework, is customizable. And you could build something from a complete open system all the way down to a Bitcoin if you set the right limitations on the application. But of course, it would be very wasteful to build Bitcoin on Holochain. So for short, for the technical people, Holochain is a BitTorrent combined with a Git. It has cryptographic signatures on top, pure validation, and a gossip model. For the non-technical people, Holochain is actually a donut. So we like to think about Holochain as a donut, which I have inquired and is not gluten-free. It actually has a lot of gluten, which apparently ensures its integrity, which is very, very important. And what it does is it splits the world into two spaces. It is the inner space, the hole in the donut, and the outer space, the public space, if you will, which is outside. So Holochain is this runtime machine. And on top of this runtime machine, we have the application. And the application can have a lot of flavors based on whatever requirements you set to them. The application is the developer's choice, and it comes with the functions which are then exposed to the inside, to the private network and the public network by the Holochain runtime machine. So I mentioned that in the inside of this Holochain framework and the application is the agent. So Holochain takes an agent-centric approach rather than a global approach, and what it does is it installs every single component on the user's device, and it runs the application from the perspective of the user. Outside, we have the bakery or the public network, where we have other donuts with other applications on top, and they communicate with each other. And it is the Holochain framework, the donut, which mediates the access between the outer donuts and your inner world. So between the public network and the private network. Now, some of the basic components of Holochain applications or apps, so the frosting on top of the donut, they are made up of zones. And Holochain has used biomimicry and uses a lot of terms from biology. So a zone defines a core logic of the application. It contains all of the application's functions, and it exposes an API. The zones put together form apps DNA, and the DNA of an application define the rules of the game. So in this case, the rule of a game, if we think about, for example, Twitter, the DNA will include the fact that a tweet which node can or a user can send cannot exceed what is it now, 280 characters. So the DNA defines the basic functionality. And you can think of the DNA as a microservice. And DNAs on application level can talk to each other via bridging, which is important because it extends the basic functionalities of the application. Now, an application also has a client which talks to the DNA's API via a lightweight remote procedure call interface. And a client or a GUI is similar to the front end of a traditional application. The client and the zones together form the app bundle. These are all hosted in the conductor, which is a runtime, a Holochain runtime that sandboxes and executes DNAs and is similar to a web application server. So each application has a conductor, and each conductor becomes a peer-to-peer node. Now, if we I just want to stop for a second because I'm not sure if things are clear so far. I know I said questions in the end, but I just want to understand if the audience is still here or it's been lost. Because I've been going very deep into the technical things, which I'm not very comfortable with. And I just want to make sure that the concepts are clear, and in case they are not, I'll gladly ask one of my colleagues to help out. No.
Fine to me.
Yeah. Okay. So can I go on? Great. Thank you. All right. So whenever you sign up a new application into a network, you receive well, the conductor issues a private public key pair, which allows the network to know exactly the identity of every one of the nodes, and to make sure who is the author of that node, and to be able to find that node and relay the message to them. So the private public key pair is created by the conductor, and it is stored in a password protected file on the user's device. So everything happens on the user's device. nothing ever leaves this device, which ensures great resilience of the system. Now the application begins with the source chain, which is so at the beginning there is the source chain, which is the own data source of the application. This is where all the entries to the application, all the data will be recorded in a sequential order, and will be protected against tampering. So whenever a new journal entry in the source code starts, there is an initial entry, which is called a genesis entry, which is made up of the hash of the DNA and the agent ID. So what this ensures is that the application and the user abides by the rules of the DNA, and only after that can it start interacting with the other nodes of the network. So you can think about this in terms of I start driving a car, and I move to the UK, and all of a sudden I have to start driving on the left side of the road. So by abiding by the DNA, which says I'm driving on the left-hand side of the road, I'm basically accepting the way they do things there, and then that means that I can start driving on the British streets. So I have no excuse going further to say that, yeah, I was abiding by different rules because I acknowledged them in the beginning. So what happens whenever a new entry is added to the source code, the conductor runs a check whether this entry abides by the rules set out in the DNA and whether they are legal. So the conductor will run an instance of the DNA. It will check the entry. It will sign it with the private key, and then it will add it. It will add a signed entry with a header to the source code after the Genesis code. So it will link it to the Genesis code. So the fact that the conductor signs the transaction with the private key ensures the tampering, and if someone else sees the message, they can be sure that this message was indeed issued by the person that claims that has issued that message. So this effectively removes the man-in-the-middle issue. However, this is not exactly sufficient for data integrity. So you also need to make sure that the sequence of the messages on the chain has not been tampered with. And in order to do that, you need to look at you have a header, which includes a timestamp, an entry type, a hash, the signature, and most importantly, the previous header's hash, which basically links all of the headers to each other. So this is all fine and good, but then the question is, how do we make sure that the data is resilient, and how we can make sure that it can stand the proof of the network. So for that, we use something like a distributed hash table, which is a public data store. And the DHT is a sort of a network in which a number of peers come together, and each of them stores a tiny bit of information that has been published by the originating node for future reference. Because we don't have a central server, we need to make sure that the data is somehow always available. So if we think in terms of a tweet, I make a tweet right now and I'm posting it into the network, and the tweet will be available as long as I am online and my phone is online. But the moment I go offline, no one is going to be able to retrieve my tweet anymore. So it is very important that the data is copied by a number of peers. Now, Holochain says that there is no need to have the data stored with every single one of the peers. It is enough that some of the peers store the data and they know about each other, and in case the data is needed, the data can easily be retrieved. And in order to make sure that the system is resilient, it sets a minimum number of peers that must store that shard of data, which is set by the developer in the application. And whenever the number drops below that limit, a new node is assigned the data that it needs to store. So say we need to store the data in 20 places and 2 nodes go offline, the data will be assigned to 2 other nodes so that you always have 20 nodes holding that data. So in the DHT, you are always bound to find a helpful peer. Now, peers are there to help. What they do, as I said, is they store a part of the data, which is the header, and they also store the data in case of public data. So they are there to help you retrieve the data whenever you go offline, for example. But they can also be discrete, so you don't always have to have just public data on the Holochain DHT. You can have private data as well, in which case the peers will just hold the header, which will be a proof that the data is valid and it's been created, but it will not be visible to anyone who's not entitled to see it. The process of writing a valid entry is quite elegant, I'd say. So whenever we are trying to, so we have a DNA with the rules of the game, and we're trying to publish a word which is eggplant. And the DNA says that we can only commit 1 word, so it cannot be a 2-word sentence or a string or any such thing. So whenever we want to make an entry, we commit it to the conductor. The conductor runs the validation function, which checks it against the DNA, the rules of the game that everyone in the DHT is playing. And the DNA will validate it because in this case we have just 1 word. So because the rules are met, the publish word function is valid. The word is actually stored to the source code of the node, and it's also published to the DHT. If the entry is invalid, then the validation function will naturally reject. So what happens when an entry is shared with the network? So let's say Alice is sharing a tweet with Daniel and with Fred, and Daniel and Fred each see the message. They check using their own copy of the DNA to make sure that the data is correct. It doesn't violate the rules which are in the DNA. And if that is the case, then they store the entry into their shard of the public DHT, and they send a validation confirmation to Alice. In case the agent is trying to commit a malicious entry, then the same process will happen. They will check it against the DNA, they will find it as malicious, flag it, issue a warrant, and then they will gossip around the network about it, with the effect that now everyone knows that Alice is a malicious actor and removes the actor from the network. So this is in short the way the system works, and the system is very resilient for a lot of applications, such as I said, Twitter. You can have a distributed Wikipedia, and the great thing about having a distributed sort of platform like this is that you actually reduce the server capacity that those applications would need on a centralized server. But obviously, Holochain is probably never going to take away. If it were confined just to in an application, and someone just had to download an application in order to run all these things. So in order to help speed up adoption, Holochain created a company which is called Holo, which is a cloud hosting market for distributed applications. So what Holo does is it links a web browser page to a Holochain application. So whenever an average Joe wants to connect to, let's say, an Airbnb on Holochain, they don't need to have that Holochain, the Airbnb Holochain application installed on their phone. They can just go to the browser, and Holo will bridge the request over to the Holochain application. And in doing so, it will earn money for hosting. And the idea is to create a completely distributed hosting market in which everyone can offer their spare computing power to host a number of different distributed applications, in the hope that the future web applications will move away from centralized big tech to completely decentralized, distributed microservers on people's devices. So if you've seen the series Silicon Valley, well, this is something like Pied Piper, but hopefully more successful. So how this thing works? Well, initially there was a Holoport, which is basically just a computer which was created specially and was part of the crowdfunding. You choose the initial Holo settings, and then you share your spare capacity for the distributed apps that empower individuals and communities, or you can actually make money out of this. Or if you have additional steering power, for example, you can choose to dedicate some of that computing power to charity projects or to NGOs, something like Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia every once in a while asks us for a €10 donation. It would be much easier with Holo because you could just donate server capacity to them. So Holochain is scalable. Its network efficiency increases by all the scale. It's incentive driven. Because you will have distributed hosting, whenever the price of the hosting will go up, it's very likely that people will put their own devices to work, and they will dedicate extra computing power, which will mean that the cost will go down. It's secure because of its distributed architecture without centralized points of failure. It doesn't need any global consensus, but there are consensus between the individuals transacting. It's lightweight. You can run it on mobile phones and IoT devices. It's much cheaper in terms of transactions, but also development because it just uses JavaScript and Rust. And it becomes more efficient with scale. It enables people to store their own data, control who has access to them and when. It allows new types of applications with more flexibility. It's unlike blockchains, and it's adaptable to solutions for different distributed peer-to-peer networks. So it already enables applications in IoT, such as smartphones, smart grid. There's it's a company which is in a very advanced stage of development called the Red Grid, which builds on Holochain. Then you have artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology. So yeah, it definitely shifts the paradigm. I have tried to give you a technical overview. I kind of feel that I was a bit overwhelmed by this. I'm really hoping that you will ask a lot of questions, and I'm really hoping that my colleagues and friends will help clarify the technical bits. So I'm open. I have a few links here. I'm opening the Q&A session, and then I would like to break out in groups where you can discuss the technology or the business side in more detail after that. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll be happy to engage in a conversation with you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Razvan. Thank you for your presentation. Now I think it's time for some questions. Please, if someone has some questions, go ahead.
May I ask a question? Or two, maybe?
Yes, yes, of course.
Please.
Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation. I have a technical question for you. Is it Cadmilia-based DHT here in Holochain? Or is it, or does it use a different kind of algorithm?
Guillaume, Hidayat, you want to take this, please?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Guillem. I'm here because Raz asked me to. I'm from Barcelona, actually. Yeah, happy to answer your question. So that's a very interesting question, actually. So they first started trying to use libp2p and some of the Cademia stuff there, but they quickly found that their specific needs did not suit any of the existing algorithms.
Okay.
So they are developing their own called RRDHT, and we could get into how it works and so on, but it could get quite technical, and I have the high overview, but it's on development yet, so it's not fully published, so I cannot give you like full-fledged details of that. But basically what it does as new things is things like having neighborhoods of peers holding data. So a tweet that I committed gets stored in a neighborhood of maybe 25 nodes. And the DHT does all the interactions of, okay, a node has gone offline, so I have to call a new node, and there's always 25 nodes holding the data, things like that.
Okay, let me ask something about the DHT then. Does it use a geometry like an hypercube, like in the CAN overlay network? Do you know the CAN overlay network, don't you? It uses
No, I don't.
It uses a donut geometry with neighborhoods and so on. You know. So there are actually many different geometries regarding overlay networks. You can use rings, hypercube trees, or hybrid solutions as well. So I would like to know which kind of geometry are you using for the DHT in Holochain. Can you give some light?
Unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that question. Like I'm not working on Holochain per se, and I would have to ask that to the core developers who are right now developing the DHT technology.
Or maybe there is a publication or a short white paper or something like that that you could share with us regarding that.
Regarding the RRDHT, this is one of the pieces that is not yet fully spec'd out. So unfortunately, I don't have any white paper resource that I can send you. I think it's in the works.
Because if you would have access to that information, then we could know better how this solution would scale, how resilient the network would be. Without that information, it's difficult to tell.
I think it's also might be a question of the language that you're using, because we don't use that same language, but I do know that we have. I'm not technical. I'm the community director, but we do have. I'm going to just send you a link to the white paper that we do have that might not be addressing what you need, but it might address some of it. But we use a nearness algorithm to like for having the DHT to be content addressable, or so that that we use hash function. So when you put when you want to publish something out to the DHT, you put it through a hash function, and then that hash gets located to whoever's whatever agent's hash is closest to it, and then they're the ones that store it, and then it automatically keeps searching, as Razvan was talking about, to make sure that there are the right number of agents in the network that are storing it based off of whatever level of redundancy and validation you need for that specific use case. So as far as this, so that way it is scalable in that the more agents you have on the network.
Very high level anyhow, so
can you see my screen right now? Sorry. There is a post in the Holochain forum about RRDHT and academia, which might be more helpful for you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you see my screen right now?
No, it's still on the
Just your presentation.
Razvan.
It's still on the presentation. Okay, let me just share the. Okay, where is it?
It's the Holochain white
Yeah.
paper. Holochain white paper.
So I'll send it to you in the chat, right? The link to the forum, exactly. It's the one which I'm showing here. And I'm not sure if you can find the answers you're looking for there, but if you post a question there, I'm sure there will be someone from the organization that can help out with this.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, Raz, I think there are, that thread is a very valuable source of information about that, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I have opened up the link.
Anyone else?
Hello, any more questions?
Yes, I'm.
Ross, do you want to stop sharing just so that we could see everyone? If people do want to,
Sorry.
what's it called?
Yeah.
Turn their cameras on, then we can see each other.
Sorry, I have my camera off, but I would like to ask about consensus algorithm. Based on the example you mentioned about Alice posts malicious content and there is a gossip, and then the Alice content is deleted or something like that. So based on this, can you give some information about the consensus algorithm which underlies the Holochain?
Absolutely. And actually, this is a very essential question in the sense that I think that a point that usually we need to emphasize more is that in Holochain, there is no one network. Every application creates its own network and its own DHT and its own neighborhoods. Every application has different validation rules, so the rules of the game, and it's a different network in of itself. So with that said, the consensus is on the rules of the game. So before starting, we actually need to agree on the game we're playing. So the validation rules, that's actually the source code for the application. And then when we start the network, we already have consensus on what is valid and what is not valid. So for example, let's say that we have, the example that Raz gave, I think was good. In the Twitter application, we have the validation rules say a tweet cannot go over 280 characters, right? So if I try to make a tweet that's over 280 characters, yeah, sure, I can commit it to my source chain, but when that gets distributed to the DHT, so the other peers, those peers are going to validate with the rules of the game that we all have and we all share. And those rules are deterministic in the sense that the tweet, either the tweet is valid or not, and the same inputs have to get the same output. So everyone can agree on whether the tweet is valid or not. So imagine I'm publishing to my neighborhood, to my neighbors, and they say it's invalid. So actually they now can sound the alarm and warn everyone in the DHT that this is a bad agent because he hacked the validation rules. And that's the basic way of preventing bad actions in Holochain.
Okay, and those, does the rule can be changed during the game?
No, that's an important point. The validation rules, the source code of the app, cannot be changed during the game. You can create other games if you want. But there is an update mechanism, like an upgrade mechanism, that would make it easy to migrate from one DHT to another one. But basically in Holochain, if you want to change the rules, you need to create a new game.
Okay, and I have one more question. if I understood well, Holochain asks people to give space in their machine to install the conductor and the other components of for each node. So my machine will be, for instance, a node of the Holochain network. And if how do you make sure that I don't know how to I try to reframe in regarding privacy or anonymity. I don't know what will be installed in my machine, and if I understand well, then the other nodes, the transactions or the information will be stored also in my machine. And regarding regulations, how will that node will be assured that information, bad information, I don't know, fake news, information that person don't want to be installed in his her machine. How are these concerns taken into account in Holochain?
Okay. Well, different directions, I guess. First, one fundamental is that when the conductor is basically a Holochain node. So when you install, you first need to install the conductor, and the conductor runs DNAs, so runs Holochain's apps, basically. And Holochain, what it does with the agent-centric approach is all the choice is up to the user. The user can choose all the DNAs he or she wants to install and even leave. No one can force anyone to install a DNA or to create it or do anything with it. Holochain is open source, so we can all go and see what is going to be installed when we install the conductor. That's one part of it. Another part of it is that it's up to the application level to deal with things like fake news or other kinds of attacks that we can think of, depending on the context of the application, right? So fake news would be maybe relevant in a journalistic application or something like that. One point that I will make here is that Holochain is tuned for accountability, not anonymity. So in Holochain, everything is signed and you know who has done what at all times in that game you're playing. So you can make private games in which only your family can be invited to, but all the people inside the network will know who has made what at all times. So systems that want to be more anonymous, maybe Holochain is not the best fit. There could be some strategies, but that's the opinionation of the framework.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, anyone?
May I ask another one?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so I'd like to know how popularity is addressed in Holochain. For instance, the replication factor for the information, is it the same for the all DNA, or can it depend according to the context of the conductor?
Awesome question. No, it's not the same for all DNAs. There will be a configuration parameter when you write the DNA. You can set how much.
But it's constant for the same DNA. Am I right? For the same DNA.
So, for now, yes. But in the future, I think that there will be developing a dynamically computed the redundancy factor. So I as a peer will be constantly checking and tuning the redundancy factor as needed. I don't have the specifics on how would that work, but I think that's a direction they want to move on.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, anyone? Okay, I also have some questions. First of all, you were talking about the consensus and about the fact that the transactions and the applications need to obey some rules which are shared among all the peers, let's say. And what about if we get a majority of the peers trying to subvert the rules of the game? For instance, what happens to the transactions?
That's a good point.
It's more or less like the 51% attack on a normal blockchain.
Yeah, so that's not a thing really. A 51% attack is not a thing because with the validation rules of the code, everyone can tell what is valid and what is not. It's not like the majority is deciding the truth. Like the validation rules, every individual can by himself tell what is actually correct and what is not, right? So 51% attack is not like in blockchain is not really how it goes in Holochain. When one of the nodes starts behaving badly, it very rapidly becomes like rejected from the network. The question, and this is actually a very nice experiment that we could run, is what if a lot of nodes try to behave badly at the same time, like a lot of nodes? Yes, I think that they could eventually try to like corner some nodes by misdirecting or delivering bad data. But I want to make 2 points here. So first of all, that starts to seem like another game wants to be played. Like if all those people are not playing by those same rules, maybe it's because we need another game to play by those rules. And two, Holochain networks can be private in the sense that you can set the rules to only allow certain agents to enter the network. And this is actually one of the main concerns when you are developing an application. I think most applications won't actually be open, but define very clear rules on how you get into the application. And then you're much, much less concerned about anyone trying to boot up thousands of nodes and trying to attack the network because they won't be able to get in the first place.
Okay, thank you. The second question I have for you is nowadays one of the trends that is being discussed, including in some ISO committees which are working and trying to standardize the blockchain technology and the distributed ledger technologies itself, it's interoperability. How do you see, for instance, your solution Holochain getting interoperability with other existing blockchain technologies?
That's a very nice question as well. So I think there has to be some experimentation, but it's there are some things that are definitely possible.
The first thing I think is it desirable or not? First of all, is it something that Holochain would like to do? Is it useful for Holochain or not? Then the second part of the question is how are the technical details that maybe allow this to be possible?
I would say that from a Holochain perspective, the framework is much more concerned on making DNAs and applications on Holochain interoperable with one another than being interoperable with other technologies. But I think that we can build solutions that allow for that, not very without as much an effort. There are some different properties in Holochain that make it quite different than other blockchain technologies. So for example, if I'm running a private network, maybe a blockchain which is run out of my network won't be ever interoperable because two nodes are not running on the same machine anywhere, right? So there are, depending on your use case, there are things that make sense and things that don't. But for example, Holochain, and I've been working with projects in which we made interoperable Holochain, IPFS, and also we were focusing on developing interoperability with Ethereum also, through private keys and the way in which you get authenticated in both platforms. So yes, what am I missing from your question? Sorry.
No, I think you addressed pretty much everything.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Is there
welcome.
some more questions from the audience?
I would like to ask another question, if
Yes,
possible.
go ahead, Katerina.
Okay, thanks. Does Holochain so if I understand well, it works with like a cryptocurrency, and does it support smart contracts with the interaction with the external oracles or things like that?
Okay, yeah. A very important point which I think we should make is that Holochain does not have any currency built in. You can build a Twitter or a wiki or something like that without having to deal with tokens, currencies, anything of the sorts. So that's one very important thing. You can build currencies on top of Holochain. Like you can have an application that deals with transactions, and that's totally fine. But Holochain by itself is not, it has not built in any kind of currency. And then I'm trying to remember, but I can't remember the second part of your question. Sorry, what was it?
So my question was about smart contracts and the interaction with oracles.
Yeah, sure, perfect. So in Holochain, actually smart contracts are just applications. So smart contracts exist in blockchains because there is only one network. So you have to be able to deploy new programs on that network as to behave to change the behavior of the network. In Holochain, the shape it takes is you just write another DNA which is like a programmable smart contract in a way, but it's not really a good fit. And then you install it in your Holochain conductor. So, and then with the interaction with oracles, yeah, absolutely. You can set a validation rule in your Holochain application that says, this node is our oracle and we're going to believe everything he says. That can be a perfectly valid validation rule. So your application can do pretty much whatever it wants in terms of what rules, who are the agents participating in the network, and what are their roles.
Okay, so can you consider an oracle that is outside Holochain, or only it is interoperable with outside I don't know, websites, anything that function like an oracle for weather or for currencies, quotation, anything. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. In Holochain, that would be just another agent. Like the restriction there is that you have to have some conductor running somewhere. That's the oracle, right? So that's, I don't know, a conductor running, if we're talking about the weather in my town, a conductor running in the, how is it called? The main building, ayuntamiento is in Spanish. Like the house of the town.
Town hall.
Town hall, yeah, thank you. So you should have running some computer there with the application installed. And then that application can commit data to the DHT, and that data can be like as if it was spoken from an Oracle point of view. We don't really have the Oracle concept in Holochain because every conductor is equal in a sense, but on top of the Holochain primitive, you can write validation rules like that. Yeah.
Okay, and I have two more questions. Sorry.
Sorry, Katerina. Just one question before that. If you use Holo, can you make do with the conductor in the town hall, or would you be able to use Holo to bridge that thing?
Yes. Yes. So Holo, what it does, more general sense, it's Amazon Web Services for Holochain apps. So you are running your application hosted on somewhere, not on your machine, on someone else's machine. You're right, Ras, you can do that, but the application has to be running somewhere. So if it's not running on your conductor in the town hall, it's running on the Holo port. That's the little devices that people have to run hosted applications. It's going to be running on a Holo port in my house. So that's a trade-off, right? You have to decide what route you want to go.
Okay, if I may ask my other question about the scalability, have you tested this in a big scale, and what insights can you give us about scalability?
Yeah, so actually right now they are experimenting with the source code for the framework is not yet fully ready, and the Holo network is not available yet for you to host applications. So it's a work in progress, but they have been able to run at full work, let's say, nodes that are doing things all the time, not idle, 5,000 of them in the same DHT. As of now, that should improve over time as they polish the source code and so on. And about the scalability, one of the things that's important here is that if you set the redundancy factor, like imagine the redundancy factor is 25, right? And that's like would be a normal redundancy factor. That redundancy factor doesn't scale with the number of nodes. So if you have 100 nodes, 25 nodes of those will be holding each tweet, let's say. But if you have 1,000 nodes, it will be 25 nodes that will be holding the tweet, right? So if you think about it, every time the network scales, the amount of work being done by the node decreases by a lot. And if every node does the same work, it's basically more or less linear. The amount of storage each node has to hold. So you don't have like the bottlenecks of blockchain in that sense.
Okay.
Do you have some more questions, Katerina?
I would like to, thank you. I would like to ask about the Holo cloud hosting market. This is a central server or is also distributed?
Yes, so Holo is an infrastructure. That's what so Holo is the company, and they are developing both Holochain and Holo on top of it. So Holo is Amazon Web Services for Holochain apps. And this is not centralized, is distributed on little holoports that Raz showed you earlier, like they are little gray boxes like this. But you can run the Holo software you will be able to run the Holo software in other devices as well in the future. And the way that works is if I a new, like my grandmother or something like that, a web user that doesn't really know anything about blockchain, cryptocurrencies, or anything like that, and they go to a web browser and to a web page, that web page gets you redirected to that Holoport, so that little box, one of them, because Holo will have many of them running, right? And that's their server in a sense. I don't want to call it a server, but that's the node that the web browser uses to run the Holochain application in. And then the user uses the web application without even noticing they are actually running, not in a centralized server, but in a hosted Holochain application in a Holoport. That's the basic overview.
And so it's distributed in one of the nodes, but who selects this node?
So everyone can run a Holo node. The Holo application will have its own validation rules, so you can't break those validation rules. Other than that, anyone can run a Holo node.
And what is the business model for Holochain team to live based on this?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to, Eric, if you want to jump in after me, go ahead. No worries.
It's my last question.
Yeah, don't worry. It's because it's not so much a technical question, so
Okay.
It's not my expertise. But so the basic gist is that these Holoports, so Holo as an application does have a cryptocurrency that's called Holofuel. Okay, so Holochain is the framework, doesn't have a currency. Holo as a hosting platform does have a cryptocurrency called Holofuel. With Holofuel, you pay someone to host your application. Mm-hmm. So exactly like Amazon Web Services, you pay Amazon to host your application. In Holo, you pay someone, you may know them, you may not, to host your application, and you pay them with Holofuel. So Holo takes 1% or less fee on that transaction, and that's their main business model as far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
Eric, do you want to share something more?
That's pretty clear and complete. Is there more you want to know, or does that make enough sense? I can expound, but I can talk more about it.
No, I think it makes sense.
Okay. I mean, the one thing that I would want to touch on before while I'm here is that, as I think Razvan already shared in the chat, there is the dev camp that we've got coming up, which if anyone wants to learn to actually build on Holochain, is the best place to do it. And it's something that, I mean, we haven't really discussed, but it's to me, I mean, I work for Holo and Holochain. And Razvan and Guillaume are two of our extraordinary community organizers, and we have a really incredible community of people that are learning and building things and teaching each other and sharing. And that community is actually holding and hosting a free online developer training program for people that want to learn how to build things on Holochain, by building things on Holochain. And that's run by the community. Guillaume's run a couple of them and is currently supporting the group that's now running this one. And it's a really good way to get your hands into the tech. And it's free. There's no requirements. So you don't have to show up all the time or whatever. We record all the sessions and share them. But to get a sense of what's possible with it, it's a really good way to actually be digging in. And I think you're all highly technical. So it's one of the best places to connect, as well as we have regular spaces for people to learn more about the tech as well. And Guillaume hosts a weekly hackathon. All this stuff you can learn about and see on the forum, which you'll see if you go follow those links that Razvan posted. Yeah. And if anyone wants any questions about the community or how we do that, or about the organization and how it runs or any of that kind of stuff, I'm happy to speak to it. But okay, not doing it as well.
Okay, as you know, we are mostly from the university, so we are mostly teachers and researchers and students. One of the questions I have for you guys is, how do you see, for instance, your cooperation with universities on what regards master theses and PhD theses, or even research and development projects?
Great question. So, and you'll have to forgive the birds that are chirping with me right now, or
That's
enjoy
right.
them, one of the two. We are excited for people to do research on what we're making and what we're building and to share. The way that we're a really small team and we're really delivery focused. By design, there's a point where we grew too big and we've focused that back down, and we're really focused on producing and creating Holochain core. And so our community actually would be the place where the best relationships would be to support research. And there's some research that then there'd be spaces in the community, like groups of projects that are like Red Grid or Junto, that are or what Guillem's building with Mutual Alpha is the actual project. And then there's a bunch of projects, so it's really like when people come to us, it depends on what they're interested in, and we say, okay, what are you interested in? We plug you in with the right people to get connected to and to move forward with. And there's a couple people there's one person who's actually doing their, I think it's doctoral research on management structures, and who's actually like we've been working with for nearly a year now, and who's like studying how we organize as a company. But we're really excited to have people do actual research on the tech. Yeah, if that's helpful.
Okay, is there some more questions? No. So
one last two.
Go ahead, Katerina.
Real last one. So the code you develop is open source. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Holochain is open source. And if this is coming from the question around like Holo is a company and Holochain is technology, or is like an open source technology, it's that Holochain is totally open source. We just want people to be able to build fully distributed, peer-to-peer, scalable applications like anywhere, and anyone can do that, and anyone can use it to do that. The way that we're funding that getting built is with Holo, is with having the basically like Airbnb of cloud hosting for Holo applications. So this is part of something that's cool about the organization is like, we're only going to be successful as a business if we're successful in delivering our product. We're not going to make any money off of people that are building Holochain applications. And we want lots of people that build just pure Holochain applications that never need to use a, what's it called? Like web hosting. We're not going to, like, that's totally Holochain. The only place that we can make money is when it's useful enough for people to build a Holochain application that has specific functions because our product is valuable enough, or like Holochain is valuable enough, that then they want to be able to provide web hosting. And then by facilitating that web hosting and taking 1% or less, that's the only source of income that we have to support to build the project.
Okay, so there are two things. One is I give space on my machine for others to install applications. So part of my machine will be a node, and the other one is to I don't know, buy an application which is available on the Holo market. Yes, is that correct?
Okay, so if we're talking, you're just talking about Holo, you're not talking about Holochain specifically right now, right?
The network, the distributed network counts on the space, if I understood well. counts on the is supported by the space I want to give, or each node gives in his or her machine.
Okay, so yeah,
Go.
Razvan, would you pull up the DHT image,
Yeah,
please?
sure. Which one? This one? Okay.
That one. Okay, so this is a holochain application. We're not talking about the hosting here. So each of these little agents, each of these people has downloaded a holochain application locally, and they're running it, and they're functioning as a full node, as their own independent node. Each one of them does validation of any interaction that they're participating in, and then they're also validating their share of the network. They're like, I think of it as like everyone has two little books that they're keeping. One book is their personal history. This is all my stuff, my personal chain, right? And then the other book is my share of the DHT. This is what I'm holding for the commons or for the group. So that's a holochain application. So that way you'd be functioning as a node in this context, like participating again as a full node in a holochain application. So let's say someone makes a holochain application, and we're not talking about web hosting, you're installing it and running it locally. If that's happening, then you might pay to download it, right? You might pay for the software so you could download it locally, and then you run it. And that's how, and then someone could make a holochain application and charge people so that they can run it locally like that. So that's one way of having a business model around it without ever having to use Holo. And that's how holochain works, like independently. Does that make sense?
Okay.
And then if
Sorry.
we were, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'll come back.
And then if you're looking at it from Holo, the way that it would work is, is there a Holo? Is there like a Holo doodle?
What?
Is there like a drawing? Here, I'll just draw it really quick.
So in the meantime, if I can just explain to Katerina something. So just assume that we are both running Twitter. The share of data you need to hold for me is very, very minimal. It's maybe a few megabytes. And the bigger the network grows, if we are going to be 1,000 nodes or 10,000 nodes, the redundancy level is still going to be 25 nodes, right? So the redundancy level is not going to increase. It's still only going to need 25 people to make sure that the tweet that I posted is going to be retrievable. So the amount of data you need to hold is just the tweets of 25 people. So it's not so much, but in exchange, you get free access to the software, and other people are also holding your tweets. Does it make sense?
Okay.
All right, so, and the way that Holo works here, right, is like, here's someone's computer, right, and they're going on Chrome. So they're just going to their normal like a web client, right? And they're going to type in an address here, and they're going to just go to a web app, and we're going to call it, I don't know, I've been spending a lot of time in the woods lately, so it's going to be a application for identifying trees, okay? And it's an application for identifying trees in my local area. So that application is a holochain application. I'm going to use this computer, and because I'm not very technical, I don't ever have to know that it's a holochain application. For me, it's just a web app. I'm just going to this website, and it's doing this cool stuff for me. Now, let's say Guillaume, this Guillaume is a little weird.
Raz, if you can stop the sharing, I think we can see better.
So let's say Guillaume built this application, okay? So Guillaume made this application. He built it on Holochain. So the application this is what the application looks like. It's an abstraction. And he built it to run on Holochain. And this is what Holochain looks like. I'll make it the circle-y thing. Okay. Now, in order for this to work here, we need a computer, like a holoport, like that gray box that Raz was showing the picture of earlier, the little circle here. Now, this gray box is running Holochain locally, and it's going to run a copy of Guillaume's application. It's also going to run on Holochain, right? It's going to run a copy of Holo, right? So this is what Holo looks like. So Holo, and this we'll call the Plants app, right? Plants Holo. So what happens is, because it's using Holo, it's going to receive a call. Oh, okay, here we go. Someone wants to go to this website, and we're going to serve them this web app. Instead of it coming from Amazon Web Services, right? And then they go to the website and Amazon serves it. What happens is this person serves it. And let's say you, Katerina, I don't know what you look like, so we'll just do one of those. You own this Holoport. So instead of the payment, so like Guillaume is paying, instead of paying AWS to produce to host it, Guillaume's going to pay you to host it. And then a little bit of that payment here is going to go to Holo, like that. And that's going to pay for people to continue to build Holochain core.
May I ask in with a question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you monitor service level?
I don't know what that means. If
Katerina is providing a service, isn't she, in the network?
Uh-huh.
In your diagram. So what happens if she doesn't have enough bandwidth, if she's too slow?
Yeah, that's great. So there's way more than just like how Amazon, this is not to scale one Holoport to all of Amazon Web Services. So you'd have to imagine, that was a joke and it was really funny. Everyone's muted, so I'm just assuming you're all laughing. There's a whole network, right, of these serving boxes. So let's say Katerina's box gets shut down, right? And Rui, you've got one also, right? And your internet's going real well. Then what's going to happen is it's just going to intelligently route it to you, and you're going to produce it. And then Katerina's going to know, because Katerina's also going to have a computer here. We'll make it a laptop because I can draw it faster. It's not a good laptop, whatever. On Katerina's computer, she'll be able to actually see what she's providing in hosting and be able to check in on that. And say like, oh, okay, I want to provide hosting to this. And that's what Razvan was saying earlier. Maybe you Rui want to, you love plants so much and you want to make sure that you're hosting the plant app for free. So naturally then the system intelligently will set it up so that you can host the plant app for free. And then that's like, or you'll give it a much cheaper rate. And that's how the market's gonna stabilize. Okay, so you have a market for this, for providing this service. There's a market for providing it. So basically the big trick that we're doing here, and I mean, I know it's a very clear diagram, but like the thing that's really revolutionary in this is that the payment for the hosting here does not happen in national currency. It happens, not in Holo tokens. It happens in Holo fuel, right? Exactly. Okay. But anyhow, you have to monitor the service level of Katerina because maybe she systematically is very slow on providing the services. Yeah. But that's the same way as you would monitor servers. If you were had a giant server farm, you'd be paying attention. Oh, this one's broken. So you would just So it's the same kind of function. Yeah. Kind of metrics. Okay, that's fine.
Can I add something also? So at the Holo level, yes, the application will be each peer will be monitoring things like bandwidth, online, offline, and you will actually I'm sorry, Guillaume, I got to interrupt you. I have to go. I've got another meetup. Thank you so much for having us. Thanks for organizing it. Thanks, Razvan.
Bye-bye, Eric.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for your questions.
Yeah, so finishing, sorry. At the Holo level, yes, those kinds of things are monitored. And as an application developer, you will be able to set based on what parameters you want which hosts to host your application. So maybe you want only hosts with a 90% uptime, something like that. And maybe those are, you have to pay more for them. But then at the Holochain level, peers are also monitoring each other's availability and whether they are online, offline, how much online time they have for things like data redundancy. So if I, for example, see 20 nodes in the network, but I know that, if I see 25 nodes in the network and the redundancy factor is 25, but I know that half of them have an online time very, very little, I'm actually going to go, okay, we need more people actually to hold the data itself. So it's at two levels the monitoring happens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Holochain does not needs the Holochain needs the Holo, or just to clarify, it doesn't need it, right? Okay.
Raz, you want to answer that? Or...
No, it's
Okay,
just to clarify,
Yeah,
because you said earlier.
Yeah, no, it absolutely does not need it. You can run a Holochain node in your machine completely free. You can run a network with your friends without ever touching Holo.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Guys, any more questions?
I don't want to. I would like just to ask one last one about the monitoring of the usage of the resources. Does it mean that when each node installs the conductor and all that, it also installs software to monitor the network and the usage of the resources of the other peers of his network?
Yes, it's part of the conductor code, actually. So part of what the conductor does is in each one of those networks, monitor those services.
Okay. It's light or is lightweighted or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So actually, right now we can't say it's lightweight. I think we were in the order of hundreds of megs, the binary, because it was putting so many libraries and so on. But with very new approaches to building the conductor and so on, we are getting like 15 meg binaries, something like that.
Okay. Thank you very much. It is very interesting.
Okay, I don't know if there are any more questions or not.
Just one more question.
Yes, go ahead, Rui. The last one.
How heavy it is to maintain the network?
In what sense?
For instance,
mean?
I don't have any content that would be replicating in my node, okay, how heavy would it be for the networking on my side? Just to maintain.
Okay. Just maintaining a new entry you committed, like you commit a tweet, and how heavy is that, right? I mean, yeah, okay. So if you commit a tweet, there are 3 things that get committed to the DHT. You have to commit the tweet itself, the header, and then you have to register that agent made that activity. So actually 3 things in the DHT, and those 3 things have the redundancy factor of 25 or whatever redundancy factor you actually set. So I don't know, for example, if you commit a tweet, with these 3 pieces, it will get stored in 25 plus 25 plus 25, 75, I think. If the network is big enough, if the network only has 20 nodes, it will get stored in those 20 nodes, and that's it. But it's only storing that amount of data, which is like, I won't even say kilobytes long, it's bytes long. So it's actually storing the data itself.
And to monitor those nodes, do you use things like keep alive and so on?
Yes, and that's one of the other areas I should get back to you. I don't have those things at the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, guys, I think this is it. I don't know if anyone has more questions or not. I think it was really interesting, really productive. Thank you guys for making this presentation. Thank you to Razvan, thank you to Guilhem, and also to Eric, which has already left. Thank you guys from Holochain. I think we have here really interesting stuff. Maybe we should consider in future projects with our students and also maybe in other related initiatives. And I don't know if someone wants to add something else. Tiago, do you want to add something?
Well, I think it was really helpful and wonderful technology to learn about, and we are willing to learn, to really learn about more about it. And yeah, I think thank you very much to all you guys to present it in like this way. It was really helpful, and thank you to everyone to come and to be with us.
Okay, thank you, Tiago. Just to remind, thank you once again, and just to remind that I have recorded this session and we will publish it that afterwards for someone to recall some of the discussions we had here. And maybe we should do something like this next year again, or have some other projects or initiatives together again, to further use this technology in some of the things we are doing right now. So,
the overheads.
Sorry?
We will be sharing the overheads.
The what, sorry?
The overhead.
Yeah, I can share. Yeah, I can
Oh, yeah, I think so.
The PowerPoint, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Carlos and Tiago for organizing this.
You're welcome.
Thank everyone for being here, and a very special thanks to Guilhem, who saved the day with all the technical prowess. Been completely overwhelmed, but I think he kind of gave a bit more clarity than I was able to. But it's teamwork, so we accomplished it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a nice evening. Stay safe.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.